Well, hello everybody. Anthony Sequeira here with AJS Networking, and I want to welcome you to our webinar on the death of the route switch track eventually and the new enterprise track from Cisco Systems. I would love to say a special hello to our live audience members. Please chat your questions in as you have them as I am going. I've muted all your microphones. And if anyone comes in unmuted, I'll mute them as well. The reason being, as you know, is we are going to be making this available via AJS Networking for everybody. The live attendees, of course, I had to limit to just our CCIE Prep Club members, and that's because, well, the main reason, I have a 50-seat limit, and we would have gone well over that if we had opened this up to absolutely everyone. So thanks so much for attending, those in the live audience, and don't hold your questions, chat them in via the chat interface. And with that said, let me just make that chat interface larger so I can see it. All right, let's get started. The enterprise track. It's not often that I'm right with my, my looking into the future. So I got to gloat for a minute. This is one time I was actually right. I was talking to my good friend and co-CBT Nuggets instructor, Keith Barker, months and months ago. And I said, you know what, Keith, have you noticed why we are not seeing updates to so many different programs with the Cisco certification? And we knew there was a little bit of a reorganization going on inside of Cisco Learning, but I was making the assumption that not only was it that, but there were so many certifications going stale. My guess was they were about to revamp their program holistically, big time. Yay, I was right. And I also figured it would be announced at Cisco Live, and I nailed that one. So anyways, it's not that I'm smart about this kind of stuff. It's just that I've been around Cisco that long and their certification programs. It just sense that's what they were going to do. I just did. So here is a look at this new enterprise track. And we're going to start and go through the ones that you're most concerned about, I'm sure. And we start at the entry level. And it's interesting because the entry level, most people think about CCENT. And yeah, that would be considered entry level, but that's going away. But the entry level certainly doesn't look like it's going away. And that's one of the areas where we're going to see tracks. The associate level has no track anymore. We know there's specialist certifications. Those will be track focused. Professional certifications, track focused. Expert track focused. Architect, no track. So you've got two now that really stand out, associate and architect, where they're not going to be breaking those down by, security, wireless, industrial, etc. The entry level looks like it's going to continue to be this concept of a Cisco certified technician, or CCT, and this is where there can be tracks. To quote Cisco, this is where Cisco certified technicians have the skills to diagnose, restore, repair, and replace critical Cisco networking and system devices at customer sites. So very kind of hands-on centric with the gear. And, a lot of people don't know that this exists today. And they don't know that it exists today because CCENT is what most of the world focuses on. But this, as I said, does exist today. And if you look today, there's a CCT for data center, and there's your exam code and title. You could go up to Pearson VUE and take this thing right now. There's CCT routing and switching. You could go up there and take this thing right now. And of course, the last day to test on these is the big date that we are hyper focused on now, February 23rd, 2020. The cutover for all this new and exciting stuff from a certification perspective that Cisco is doing is February 24th, 2020. And if you're wondering, boy, oh boy, why did they wait till next year? I'm recording this on June 17th, 2019, and it's like, well, wait a minute, why is that date so far out there for all these exciting changes? And quite honestly, it's so they can get it all done. They have a lot of work to do, and this gives them plenty of time to get it all done. But most importantly for us, it gives us time to wrap up stuff we're working on because you get grandfathered in. So that's a really cool thing. Like if you do your, CCNA route switch and you get it wrapped up this December, when they make the cutover, you get that new cert. So that's a very important aspect of this too. So the Cisco Certified Technician, this I'm certainly thinking is going to live on in their entry level thing, and that's again where they can do specialization tracks. The big news that got everyone so blown away is that there is no track approach when it comes to the associate level of certification. So the CCNA now takes on this just really broad look at IT with a Cisco focus, obviously, but it's really trying to go after like job roles. And this is where Cisco's keeping up with other cert programs. Microsoft, job role focus. CompTIA is getting very specific with job roles. And I think we're just going to see more and more and more of this. Certifications should have a direct correlation with stuff that we are doing in jobs, day to day. And Gary, CC Network Plus, that's right. It's funny that they're sticking to their nomenclature, but it wouldn't have been a surprise to see them change that. 200-301 CCNA is going to be the new exam code, as you can see there, and it's valid for 3 years, like a lot of this stuff is going to be. I won't bother to say something like that again and again and again in this presentation because it just holds true across the certs. But isn't it fascinating what this one exam replaces? This one exam replaces cloud, collaboration, CyberOps, data center, industrial route switch, security, service provider, wireless, and surprisingly, the CCDA. So all of those, February 23rd, 2020, that's their death date. On the 24th of February, they do not exist. All of those certs that you see on screen. And this, as I said, is the piece that has gotten the most fanfare. This is what everybody's talking about. And yeah, it's really interesting. Now, remember, there is migration with all of this change. In fact, when you go up to Cisco certifications and you click on the button that says Explore Next Level Certifications, that's where you see all this new stuff. All the new certification info pages there have a migration tab. And that migration tab is something that you would be interested in looking at. I'll share a lot of it with you in this presentation, but that's where I got this information from. Like, for example, with the CCNA, if you get any of those previous CCNAs before the cutoff date, then you get the new CCNA automatically. And they mentioned a specialty badge. Ooh, yay! That's pretty cool. So I guess what's going on here, like if we go back one step, if you complete your CCNA security before this cutoff date, you get the new CCNA, and apparently you're going to get a little badge that says you are a security type specialist. So that's neat. Now, watch out. I know none of you in my live audience of this webinar are going to care about this, but I know many of you watching the recorded version are going to care about this. watch out for CCENT, right? Because if you have worked hard to get that, and then the February 24th date comes, ouch. You have to do that new larger scope CCNA exam. So that's definitely something to watch out for. That would be really sad, wouldn't it? Someone gets their CCENT, they're all excited, and then the cutoff happens, and they essentially don't have anything. Ouch. So that's definitely something to watch out for. All right. By the way, of course they have something. They have all that wonderful knowledge that they gathered through the CCENT process. So if you look at the bird's eye view of what's in that new CCNA exam, you see that it's a lot of stuff that would have been covered in those other CCNAs, but certainly by no means all of it. I mean, not even close. One that comes to mind is like CCNA Cloud. The CCNA Cloud never got much traction. It's one of the reasons that Cisco was probably pretty happy to kill it. It never got much traction. At CBT Nuggets, I created the first of the two courses to achieve it and never even did the second one because the first one never had that much traction. Why did it never get much traction? Well, my theory was there was too much confusion about CCNA Data Center versus CCNA Cloud. There was too much carryover of content there. Just too much, non-clarity of who would take what. It seems like you would want to take both of them if you were interested in cloud, both data center and cloud. So this new CCNA is comprehensive, but not all that comprehensive. Let's look at the network fundamentals section of it. We have like the function and network components, topology, architectures. So right there, you can see where Cisco is really saying, okay, we know we killed the design track, and we need to give something along the way of design here. Ooh, that's the biggest check mark I've ever made. And so, that's what they're doing. They're saying, all right, look, let's go ahead and let's make sure we're getting design stuff in this new CCNA. Physical interfaces and cabling, things that could go wrong with those, TCP versus UDP, IPv4 addressing, IPv6 addressing, the TCP/IP configuration of clients. This would be Windows, Mac, Linux, etc., wireless, virtualization, and the fundamentals of switching. How does a switch work? The new CCNA then has a network access section where we get VLANs, trunks, layer 2 discovery mechanisms like Cisco Discovery Protocol, Ether channeling, your modern flavors of spanning tree, wireless architectures. Again, we're getting into design there. Wireless LAN components, wireless LAN management, wireless LAN client access, and then an IP connectivity section that does the components of a routing table, how routers route, static routing. Interestingly, single area OSPF v2 as your only routing protocol. Wow, that's a big difference in the CCNA. So no RIP, no EIGRP, no BGP. If those are brought up, they're not in the sense of configuration that I can tell. First hop redundancy protocols, and then a ton of IP services, no surprise, from NAT to TFTP. And then security fundamentals. So, key concepts of security, like what is a threat, what is a vulnerability, security program elements to help organizations and specifically the associate level employees of those organizations go to their IT departments and say, look, we really need to come up with some of these acceptable use programs and all these different security mechanisms in-house that can help us be secure. Local passwording, password policies, no big surprises here. Wireless security protocols, because of course we need to bake in wireless into this new CCNA. And as far as configuration goes on wireless, configuration of WPA2, and as you might guess, specifically using pre-shared keys. So one of the things that you see in the new CCNA is the fact that, yes, they will be doing implementation of some of this stuff, but they will keep that scope very defined and very finite. The next section there is an exciting one, automation and programmability. And this is the big theme. This is the big new theme that we see in this enterprise networking track. If someone were to say to me, all right, Anthony, in a nutshell, what's the biggest difference between the old route switch track of Cisco certifications and the new enterprise network track, I would say, without a doubt, it's automation and programmability throughout. With that said, no matter what level of Cisco cert you're on then in this track, start embracing the study of these concepts because they're throughout. Also, it's why I decided to do this first of many live webinars for you on this track. It's why I decided to look at the entire track today holistically, so that we could see the entire track laid out before us, and we could see things like how automation and programmability is throughout it, and how some of us may want to drop back in our studies a little bit, right? You might be right now at a CCIE level when it comes to RIP, OSPF, EIGRP, BGP, ISIS, and, so any routing protocol that is interior or exterior that we could see. You may be at an expert level there, but you may be at the associate level or even entry level when it comes to automation as it applies to network management, controller-based networking, software-defined network architectures, the Cisco DNA Center, REST-based APIs, which make up almost all of our cloud solutions, and orchestration tools like Puppet, Chef, and Ansible, and a wonderfully used JSON language that is utilized, across a wide gamut of technologies today. An example there I would give would be, AWS is when I first started working with JSON a lot, because I could spin up very easily entire Amazon Web Service architectures using a JSON script. Yep, just using that JSON info, I could automate big time in something like AWS. So that is exciting stuff there that comes to this track. And as I said, we see it throughout. So let's take a look now that we have covered the entry level and then the trackless associate level, right? No tracks there at associate, just that CCNA we just mentioned. Now let's jump to our professional level. At the professional level, we start to see the development of the tracks again. But what we are focused on in this presentation is that enterprise network track that is replacing route switch. Here, we're going to pass 2 exams. One that covers core enterprise tech, and then 1 concentration exam that you can choose. Wow, clever, pretty cool. So the 1 core exam is 300-401 Encore. I wonder if they'll be sued by, I think it's Buick that has an Encore. All right, sorry for that bad joke. Of course they won't be sued. But anyways, there's our Enterprise Network Core Tech exam that we must take if we want to achieve this level of professional certification. Here's how it breaks down. There is an architecture section of this core exam and design. You know, no wonder they, weren't shy to kill off some of their design certs, because we start with general design principles, then get into wireless LAN, then we cover cloud architectures, Cisco's software-defined WAN, software-defined access, QoS, hardware and software switching. This exam then has a virtualization section, which covers virtualization technologies in general, then data path virtualization, technologies like GRE in all of its wonderful variants, and then network virtualization for things like overlay transport virtualization and VXLAN and all those wonderful technologies that help us virtualize the network today. After the virtualization section, there is an infrastructure section of the core exam, and this is where we get our layer 2 technologies like VLANs and trunks and Ether channel, going beyond what the single CCNA did for us, going into much more detail there. And then our layer 3 section, where we're going to get all of our glorious routing protocols. So this is where we see EIGRP, this is where we see BGP, etc. A wireless section here, an IP services section here. And then the network assurance section of the core exam, where we see command line tools, where we see NetFlow, where we see IPSLA. And then we have the security section of the core exam, where device access controls, control plane policing, ACLs, securing those REST APIs, wireless security, network security design, and then, no surprise to us, an automation section to bring it all home on this core exam. Python called out specifically, JSON, Yang, APIs, big focus on REST APIs, embedded event management, EEM, a Cisco specific trick, and then orchestration tools like Chef, Puppet, Ansible. A new one they called out is SaltStack compared to the CCNA. So that is your core exam at the professional level. Again, you might be expert level knowledge on all the technologies I just discussed, except maybe this piece. So you might selectively, go to the automation orchestration area, programmability area of the CCNA, then go to that area of the CCNP enterprise, just not to take these tests, but just to get the education you need in these technologies. Next up, we would have the exam where we get to choose one. So remember that those topics we just covered were all in the core professional exam, but then we get to choose. Are we going to specialize our professional level with advanced routing? Are we going to do SD-WAN? Notice those are implementation focuses. Or are we going to go in a design specialization for enterprise networks in general or wireless in general? Or are we going to implement enterprise wireless for our specialty? Or are we going to specialize in automating and programming solutions? Notice that exam, automating and programming solutions, would be something we might be super interested in just for the knowledge once again. So we might say, yeah, we're not going to do the new CCNP. We're just going to really focus on the IE, but we might drop back to that whole exam course right there, the course that's going to correlate to that exam, if we want to gain those skills because we're weak in those for the new CCIE. Now, Gary mentions there's now no prerequisite for professional. So you're going straight here if you want. Yes, Gary, excellent point. So if you look at the CCNA level and you say, I've got all that knowledge that's in the new CCNA. You know, I honestly think that applies to me, for example. So I wouldn't touch the new CCNA because I've already got all that knowledge. I would jump right into the new professional level. And, you know, I would probably do, well, I'd have to do the core exam, and there'd be very little for me to learn in that core exam with my knowledge set. And then I'd probably do the automating and programming solutions elective exam because that would be so cool to me, you know, but that's going to vary. All right. Question there from Cato. There's no CCIE written anymore, so presumably the CCNP Enterprise is the new prerequisite? Careful, Cato. There is a CCIE written. Yes, the CCIE written still lives on, and we're about to talk about it. Because I think, hey, Cato, thanks for the segue. That's awesome. And by segue, I don't mean a device that I ride around town on looking like a dummy. All right, here we are at the expert level. Remember what I said. The expert level is where tracks rear their head again. So with the expert level, we still have tracks that we can go in, like security, versus the track we're talking right now, which is the enterprise network. So on the CCIE, it's no longer called CCIE Route Switch. It's called CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure. And it begins with the written. The written, and this is where what probably confused you, Cato, the written isn't called the CCIE written. The written is called Implementing and Operating Cisco Enterprise Network Core Technologies, and it's Encore 300-401. Now, what's cool about this written is when you pass it, you earn a Cisco Specialist certification. So finally, you can list on your CV, or as we tend to call it in the United States, on your resume, you can list a certification based on you passing the written. One of my biggest pet peeves was that people would list on their CV, they would list CCIE written. And that used to drive me crazy. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Cheesy. It just seemed cheesy to me. I think what people were thinking is, well, I want to put CCIE written on my resume because I want the prospective employer to know I'm working towards my CCIE. Or perhaps a little more dubiously, they were wanting their resume to come up in CCIE searches. But that's dangerous, right? Because now you have an employer that might be tricked into thinking you have your CCIE when you don't, and you certainly don't want to get involved in that situation. So anyways, all that stuff goes out the window now. You pass the written, you get a certification. That is awesome. You can represent that certification. And I guess at the end of the day, that's what bothered me about CCIE written on resumes. It wasn't a cert. It was not a certification. So that's what bugged me, I guess, the most. So once you pass 300-401, you can take the 8-hour CCIE Enterprise Infrastructure Lab exam. Now, let's talk a little bit about migration here. Pass the current written exam, and you can jump right to the lab exam. Awesome news. So you can pass, let's make that clear, you pass the quote-unquote old written, and that will qualify you for the new lab. Now, many of you are probably thinking, well, wait a minute, I don't want the old written. I want the cert on my resume for the new written. Well, okay, no problem. If you've passed the old written, well, then go and pass the new written to pick up that cert. Either way, you're going to be qualified for that lab exam. Now, also note, and Cato says, is that valid for 2 years? I believe it is a 3-year, validity. But double check me on that. But I'm assuming it's a 3-year validity. So Cato, you're covered for sure. Cato, you passed your written in January. Yep, and Gary just confirmed, yeah, it's 3 years. So Cato, you passed. Congratulations in January. That's awesome. You are definitely set for your lab exam in this new world. Yep. Now, that last bullet, kind of common sense, but I wanted to list it. So if you get CCIE route switch before the cutover, you get the new cert. Yep. And you also get, hey, it's a 2-for-1. You also get that new specialist cert. Isn't that clever? So you're basically proving, yeah, I know everything that was on the written and I know everything that was on the lab, and I got 2 certs out of my old CCIE route switch. Now, remember, there is one big thing all of us CCIE students need to keep in mind here when we're timing this, and that is scheduling the lab. I'm going to repeat. Something to keep in mind is scheduling the lab. The lab seats, which are limited, are going to be filling like crazy. And that's because of the fact that so many people working on CCIE route switch are going to want an attempt, at least one, before the cutover. So lab seat availability might really come into play. And this is where we hear the interesting stories of people traveling halfway or all the way across the globe to find a seat. So watch out for that. All right. So what does the new written Enterprise Network Core Tech exam look like? Well, it looks like this. There's a large architecture section, and notice how it builds upon the CCNA and the CCNP for Enterprise. Look at those topics: SD access, SD-WAN, wireless LAN. It is building upon those previous certifications that we've looked at. The next section is virtualization. Again, it's building on the previous topics we've discussed. Infrastructure, layer 2, layer 3, wireless, IP services, building on those previous topic domains. And the next section is network assurance. Once again, Cisco DNA Center that came up in CCNP and CCNP for enterprise. And, it really does just build on itself. There's a security section of this new written, if you will, and, no big surprises here. And, that includes the fact that there's wireless security in it. Well, of course, there's going to be wireless security in this because we've added wireless, or Cisco has added wireless to this whole track. REST API security again mentioned. And then automation. No big surprise. Python, JSON, Yang, Cisco DNA Center, vManage, REST APIs, EEM, Chef, Puppet, Ansible, SaltStack. Okay, so all sections of that new quote-unquote written. Now, we'll be doing intense live webinars on these various topics that we've looked at today, but I did want to give you a bird's eye view here of the new practical lab exam format. Very much simplified, and I think pretty cool. 2 modules at fixed durations. No more of this, you can, get extra time in this section, but it pulls from another section. None of that stuff. It's module 1, 3 hours, scenario-based, and once you answer a question, you can only move forward, you can't move back, and the point values are hidden. So you don't know how you're doing in this section. There's going to be drag and drop about design. There's going to be documentation you've been given that you have to answer that has to do with design. When you're done with that section, you go to a 5-hour module 2 that contains your deploy, operate, and optimize topics. They'll be hands-on like we're used to, and they'll also be web-based items. So they could do drag and drop in here. They can do look at this documentation in here type stuff. You can move all around in this module, and your point values are shown. Wow. So no more like, did I do that correctly? I have no idea. The point values that you're accumulating will be shown to you. Now notice the statement at the bottom of the screen. Automation and network programmability are going to be throughout. And that makes good sense. Since programmability has to do with design, deploy, operate, and optimize in an organization, they're going to sprinkle that throughout all of these phases across the 2 modules. Now, just like before, just like with the CCIE route switch lab exam that we've been dealing with, the scoring is very similar. Module 1, you got to get a cut score. Module 2, you got to get a cut score. And then for the entire exam, you got to get a cut score. So this is super interesting in that, this does get into, it pains me to even say this out loud, but I will. You could pass Mod 1, pass Mod 2, and fail the darn test. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Let's see. No CLI anymore, says Cato. Oh, no. Don't think about it that way. You'll be in the CLI in the lab exam where appropriate, but you will certainly be in a graphical user interface where appropriate. Yep. Well, what are the two big topic domain differences for the lab? Okay, so once again, look at this. We have design, deploy, operate, and optimize. Now, if we look, I'm not going to show you every practical exam topic, but I wanted to show you two areas that are super new. And that is section 2, which is on software-defined infrastructure. So look at this. If let me put it this way. If you were like ready for your route switch lab exam tomorrow, and I said to you, nope, you're going to instead take the new 2020, the 2020 exam, the two sections that would give you the most fear, because you wouldn't know them if you had only studied for your current route switch, would be Cisco SD Access, Cisco SD-WAN, and then the automation and programmability section. Now, in fairness, you would probably know a bunch of this, though, from the new technologies, the evolving technologies section of your old written. But you get the point. We're going to be tested on these in the lab now. And that is certainly something new. Cisco had reserved the testing on this stuff for their written exam previously. So David says, how can we lab the new topics like SD Access and SD-WAN? Well, the good news is Cisco DevNet has topologies right now that are free for you to access to initially start examining this stuff. And I think they even have like step-by-step labs up there that you can do against those pods so you can start experimenting with it. But certainly it is a valid point that we are going to be seeing new curriculum from the training providers, obviously CBT Nuggets included, that covers this type stuff. And we'll see, rental equipment options that center around this stuff. And clearly, I'll be going into more detail with you on that and what options exist in our upcoming training here at both the CCIE Prep Club, the closed membership group we have, and the public AJS networking site. And Gary says, yes, DevNet does have learning tracks and sandboxes available. Yep, so awesome. So we'll see more and more at DevNet. Scott asks, I have CCNA route switch ICND2 scheduled next month. Then I want to study for the new enterprise core, but there's no study guides or labs. Help. Scott, I love what you're doing here. Finish up that CCNA route switch. Awesome, awesome. And congratulations, you'll be grandfathered into the new CCNA. As far as enterprise core goes, you're going to want to start studying the resources that are out there right now for those topics. So let me go back to like this slide right here, okay? There is tons of great content that exists out there on these tools. So that's what you can really start targeting. And if you're already like, yeah, I'm already at the professional level with a lot of that stuff, then don't forget this section right here. No, I'm sorry, hold on. We're going to go to the automation section of the written and the lab, and we're going to look at these. And we're going to say, okay, I need to be able to interpret basic Python components and scripts. I need to be able to construct a valid JSON encoded file. Okay, so great training out there on those topics. Not only from Cisco, but great training on those topics from others. For instance, CBT Nuggets has an awesome, hugely popular Python intro course. You know, intro to Python programming. So these are the type things that we want to start working on. Well, as you can hear, my voice held out for the presentation, but now it's shot. So I got lucky there. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us in this live webinar where we took a look at the new enterprise track from entry level all the way to expert that is replacing next year the route switch that we're so familiar with right now. As always, thanks so much for your attendance and your participation, and watch the ajsnetworking.com blog. I would recommend subscribing so that you can be notified in email of new webinars that we will be doing around so many of these new topics. Thanks again for your attendance and participation.